Okay. I'm Will Clark. I'm 5 weeks on the ground, so be gentle. I'm still getting used to the lay of the land, or trying to figure out which end is up. And we've got, I guess, an hour-ish to spend together, and hopefully you're in the right place, right? Your land admins, our surrounding institutions, junior colleges and whatnot, went upstairs with Scott. All right, so what are we going to do in our last hour together? Talk a little bit about working together, which we obviously need to do. But then also, I promised Abby I'd stay over here so she could record me, and then I walked all the way over there. Oh well. Review some of the things that are going on here at SIU in terms of our security program. Dive down a little bit. Lauren and Jay are here to talk a little bit about some initiatives around inventory and data encryption. And then finally discuss some steps forward, not only in security, but then also in reestablishing the LAN administrator regular meetings, right? So real quick, how many of you are LAN admin from a decentralized area? Do you say decentralized or distributed here at SIU? I've only asked that question 900 times now. So, what is it, Larry? Come on. Okay, okay, fair enough. The institution that I came from, we had we called them distributed areas, and we had the distributed computing support management team, because that was real easy to say. A team that met fairly frequently to kind of work on common initiatives, and so that'll be a theme that you'll hear me say over and over again: working together, right? Because what are we if we don't get things done together? I don't know that any one of us, whether that's in central IT or in a distributed area, can take care of all the things we have to say grace over on a given day. So on the topic of security and people being the key, and whether you kind of think of people as the key vulnerability or the key countermeasure, it does really come down to the individual's contribution in what we're trying to do and protect ourselves from in security. And I don't know if y'all want to dig in. I think Scott talked in a lot more detail than I anticipated this morning, and so I feel like a good portion of this may be some duplicates of things that he said. But the important takeaway here is that because a lot of our key initiatives and issues around security come down to human interaction, and sometimes we would call that human error. There's, I guess, as individuals go, as our job goes, you and I'm talking about you or me as an individual contributor in the IT world. I think that the majority of our customers look to us to be experts on all things that have current running through them, right? And so security is probably one of those things. And so it's important to us to be, important for our organization, I should say, for us to be up to speed and up to date with all of the bits and pieces that are security related, so that we can help prevent what's going on or what potentially could happen and help educate our customers. And then what are we as a group, right? If not working together, then kind of an island. So if you're Stephen, or if you're Pravda, who probably went upstairs, right? Your role may be slightly different in that you're running the enterprise systems that are trying to protect things sort of out at the outer edge. If you're Jay or any other LAN admin that has a close rapport with your constituents, you're focusing on the endpoint. But the big deal is that as a group together, we are one big team trying to get towards an outcome that hopefully is best for our constituents, whether they're students or instructors. You would have thought that when I started off, I'd have my speaker notes ready just in case I felt like I was losing my place, right? But there you go. That's the way it is. So let's explore options and take a look at where we are now. Scott started touching on this sort of stuff this morning. SIU does have a security program, and as part of that program, we have the bits and pieces that managers, or by that I mean administrators, executives, and auditors like to see in place. In other words, all the words in documents that do the right things, right? We classify our data, we have policies and practices for all things around operating our systems, handling our data, etc. But generally speaking, it all comes down to CIA, right? Covering the institutions as I meant confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So, we want to make sure that our constituents have confidence in the confidentiality that we keep their data, integrity in those systems, so that basically we can assure them that only authorized folks can access their information. And then, of course, availability, that those systems are available when they need to be, and certain countermeasures are in place that even in some adverse conditions, we can get back to business continuity when we need to. Has SIU had a major data breach or embarrassing event with data security? Have any of you in your careers been part of an institution that had a data breach? No? Oh, all right. Well, I'll share with you two short stories. An institution that I used to work at in the North Texas region had two things that I think the proof point guys kind of touched on. One was a spear phishing campaign. Well, it wasn't all that. It was a little bit more widespread than that. But a phishing campaign where a number of employees went in and logged into a spoofed portal to update their credentials and make sure that their next paycheck wasn't going to be delayed. Well, guess what happened? We had 90 folks, give or take, fall prey to giving up their credentials, and guess where their next paycheck went? Not to their bank account. I thought that was very telling that sure enough, it's on Proofpoint's radar or their discussion that those things happen, and we watched it happen. And the knee-jerk reaction of the institution was to take away self-service. Those bad actors logged into our ERP portal and changed those individuals' routing information for their direct deposits. Yeah, so guess what we can't do is self-service anymore at that institution, right? Log in and change your credentials. That was the broadsword that we had to bring towards that particular threat. Hopefully something else goes in place so that multi-factor authentication or some other assurance that anybody can go and change their banking information anytime they want. The other event that happened was in a housing department of some institution that I don't know anything about, a unpatched SQL server. And guess what happened to not only names, addresses, telephone numbers, and credit cards, but other sorts of sensitive information, including discipline information for residents, that sort of thing, winds up hitting the streets. That probably has an impact that is not measured easily. I mean, a reputation for the institution, reputation for the particular IT folks that were involved were impacted for probably years. And certainly there's a fiscal impact as, maybe students or parents choose other places to go. But, it is at least something that I've experienced in terms of being a part of, and it's never pleasant or comfortable. I think, again, Scott hit a number of these factors here that we're actually doing or managed to have accomplished at SIU. We'll dig down in any of those if we need to, but not all of these have been accomplished by just central IT initiatives. I think some of these things have actually been a part of efforts that you guys are doing, especially around the old computers and that sort of stuff. So I won't hammer it unless you want to talk about any of that, right? So where are we going and how will we get there? This is the fun part. So we're going to take a quick look at a few plans for moving cybersecurity forward. I think, again, Scott hit on a few of these things, like, much like winter, state-mandated end-user awareness training is coming. I think that this is my best joke of the day. I just slept through it. Maybe I didn't deliver it well. That's it. But working towards DLP, towards encryption, towards some stronger tools and practices are all part of what's going forward. And if you want to dig down on any of those that we don't dig down in today, then we will certainly be glad to talk about it either in this event one-on-one or in future meetings of the lab admin stuff. I guess Scott talked a little bit about that stuff, but the important part is we are going to focus today on our patching and our inventory. Those are things that we know we're getting dinged on at the state level in terms of the audit. And we know that we do have other areas where we need to focus and expect that we'll have future focuses on or events to talk about. But with all that, I'm going to turn it over for inventory discussion to Lauren Cook, business administrative. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, titles. See?
Right. It's just a title, like Scott said.
Like Scott said, right? Just call me Will.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't met informally, I'm Lauren Cook, and I work for the Property Control Department. Little background, I was the IT manager for the accounting department and the vice chancellor for administration and finance's office for about, 13, 16 years, something around there. I still do that on the side, as I'm sure there's a lot of land admins that have other duties along the way. So I get where you guys are at. I get where what you do on a day-to-day basis in a lot of departments. But my focus now is on property and on the physical securing of our fixed assets. So first thing I want to talk to you about, this is a little background on the audit finding. This is what Scott kind of referred to with our auditors. And you notice in the audit finding, the recommendations come down to continue to review current practices, which I think we do a pretty good job of, continue to evaluate and secure new computers as necessary, for confidential information protection. And the last one is to perform and document and evaluate the data maintained on the computer and adequately track and protect with methods such as encryption. I'll leave the encryption part to the more technical folks here, but the physical securing of the assets is what I've got to be concerned with. So some things that we've done over the last couple years in property control, and I know it affected a lot of you guys, and I do appreciate all the efforts that you guys put in clean some things out. But in 2014, we did a campus-wide computer inventory. We hired a couple guys to come in and physically go through all of campus because we had some issues we knew were out there. We knew there were a lot of missing computers. We knew there were a lot of things that weren't reported correctly on inventories. We knew some problems had occurred far in the past with surplus property, and things maybe had gone through surplus and been off of campus, yet they're still ended up on the department's inventories, or some things had been picked up from surplus and came back on campus, and we wanted to get a good handle, so we needed a base to start with. So we had a couple guys go out, and they went through about 160 buildings on campus. We took a map of the entire campus and went through each one of those. They went into each of those rooms. They scanned every computer device on there, and they went through about 18,550 desktops, laptops, tablets, servers, external hard drives. They were looking for all this information. about 17,280 were located. So, you know, we did a pretty good job. There was still a lot hanging out there. And we got done about January and kind of ran the course. They contacted people. They went back and forth with departments saying, you know, we still have 5 here that you guys can't find, or 10 or whatever it is. You know, help us out. And at the end of it, we decided to roll it into that year's inventory, which comes out around February every year. And we thought we'll give the departments a second chance, go look at it, and then report back what's missing, and we'll do a big write-off. And we wrote off, at that year, we wrote off about 1,200 computers, which sounds like a lot, but we found, you know, most of those were 5+ years old. Well, at that time, 5+ years old computers were considered old. Now I know we're dealing with much older stuff. But 62% of the computers 5 years or older were unallocated. What I mean by that is we asked guys when they went around, when you scan a computer, put a note in there and tell me what it is. Is it plugged in being used by somebody, or is it in a closet, or is it somewhere else? So 62% of those 5+ year old computers were held back, which probably doesn't surprise you. You have a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old computer is being kind of held in case somebody's goes down. We've got an extra one. We need to keep that kind of in the backlog. But then we got into the 10-year-old and the 12-year-old and the 15-year-old computers that are sitting there. You know, why are we keeping these old things? So we'll get into, we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Another thing we did, we went out, we found a lot of people were real kind of confused, and maybe you still are confused about the surplus process. We came up with a policy, well, we didn't come up with it, the state came up with a policy on getting rid of data. Basically wiping the hard drives. Any computer that left the university, hard drive had to be wiped. And there was some growing pains, and we went through that. And, you know, does this software work? How do we do it? So we've streamlined that process. We had surplus had to have a form to go out and pick up things. It just became cumbersome. As you know, whenever you go to have something surplus, you might turn in a form, and it may be a couple weeks, maybe a month, maybe more, hopefully not, but there may be some time before surplus can get back around campus to pick that stuff up. Well, in the meantime, those computers drift off here and there. When they show up, they're marking on there, we didn't pick this up, but the department says we sent that, so there's a little more, you know, issues with that. We've tried to work through that. We've tried to then go and clean up these things. IT, they set up an area where they're going to go through and actually pull the physical hard drives out so you guys don't have to scan them. So we've moved that direction. In that regard, we've also gone and created what's called a surplus property pickup request form. So instead of you filling out transfers, or the department, whoever does the paperwork in your department, fills out a transfer with every single item, tag numbers, and all of that, we just have you go to our website now. You just go to the surplus property website. You fill out basic information, where the items are listed. In the comments, you just put, 10 computers. You can put, 4 chairs and a table. Whatever it is that surplus needs to pick up, you can list it in there. You don't have to put tag numbers. You don't have to put all that. When surplus comes, they're scanning the items. They're collecting the numbers. They're filling out the paperwork of what they got. So they know they've got them. They then take those computers over to IT, drop them off. They take the rest of the stuff out at surplus. IT will then turn around and contact us and say, okay, we've pulled the hard drives out of those now. Hard drives have been destroyed. You can come pick up the boxes, and we can get the transfer completed and get the things off of inventory. So in doing that, it's streamlined us a little bit. It's let us pick up more items, which has been a good thing. We've tried to clean some things out that way. And I think we've got a much better handle on where those computers are going as they're going across campus. So if you guys have suggestions in that, if you've got a problem, always email me, call me. I'll be happy to talk to you, and we can work through some of these issues, because we want to make sure we're getting the assets. That's the whole thing. The auditors, well, I don't say it here, but the auditors really, about this whole thing, they care a little bit about the computer. They really care about the data on the computer. If we didn't send a list in every year saying we're lost, 200 computers, they would kind of go, you lost 2 or 3, we're not going to look at it so bad. But 200, well, what was on those, like Scott said, and we don't know. Hopefully we will soon, but for now, we're pulling the hard drives, wiping the data, everything is cleared as it goes out. We've changed some of the loan requirements. In the past, loans were done by departments, so you have a professor who has a laptop that wants to take it back and forth, or somebody who has their own computer set up off campus at home. That's all fine, as long as they're doing work for the university. I mean, that's the whole point of it. But we need to document it. We need to know where those items are. Well, in the past, again, when the loans expired at the end of the fiscal year, which they all do, those loans were just canceled if the department didn't renew them. So, okay, that's fine. Well, they're gone. But did that item come back to campus? There's nothing saying it did. So we've changed the policy now. We don't just cancel those. We put them in our database. We change it to an expired state, and we continue to follow up with the department saying, look, these are expired. Well, right now we've still got some departments out there that have things that expired 2 years ago. So we're continuing to follow them up. We may ramp that up. We have, we go to their dean, we go to the chair, we go to whoever we have to above them to try to get something going. We go up to the vice chancellor. So we've worked through the provost office, we've worked through the other vice chancellors. So you may get a call and say, hey, what about these items? And it's not just computers, there are other things out there, but the biggest part of loaned equipment are computers. So we're trying to get a handle onto that stuff and get those things ringing back in. I hear all the time, well, that thing's 10 years old, it's not worth anything. Maybe not to you, to me, not to them, but the auditors don't see it that way. That computer 10 years ago may have had sensitive information on it that we don't store anymore. There may be records of a student with social security numbers, things like that weren't out there before, or that aren't there now. A couple of years ago, we started an initiative that the chancellor was on board with getting rid of these 10-year-old computers. I know that was a pain. I know it still is an issue with some folks because they say, well, we need these old computers, that's all we've got. That's my backup computer. And that's fine. We tried to work through that. But in doing that, we sent out, we identified over 2,450 10-year-old computers on campus. We surplus 1,385. And then there were 667 exemptions. So some departments came back and said, well, that thing is plugged into this device. It's an engineering sort of thing. It's not plugged into the network. And there was a process to go through there, and we did that. So that was great. We also wrote off 153 lost. That wasn't so great. So our loss went up. Some departments came back and said, well, we don't know where that thing is. Now, back in 2014, that computer was on campus. But a couple of years later, it's lost. So do I think some people took some shortcuts? Yeah, I think they did. Unfortunately, I think some people just said, well, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to turn it over to surplus. Just tell them it's lost. And unfortunately, that just kind of increases our audit finding. Each year they look at it and say, oh, well, now you're writing up 153. I thought this cleaning up of these computers was going to do some good. Well, I've got to have some, give and take. We want to continue to clean these up. We're not going to do it this year. Hopefully, whenever the desktop replacement goes back in, if that can happen, where departments start getting some new computers coming in, we can pick this up again so we can go back and revisit some of these old computers. Because it's not, necessarily just 10-year-old computers. We're talking 15, 17-year-old computers. And I find it hard to believe that these things are still being used or being used in a capacity that they should be. Or if we can't find replacements, we have newer computers going through surplus now. So hopefully we can work with that and, maybe your 15-year-old computers doing the job, but we've got a 6-year-old computer that this department sent out, and we can kind of work to get that in place. So that's something, we'd like to do. We'd like to see any of the surplus items that come through get put back in use if there's a possibility there. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the change to the high theft list. Last year, the CMS, who governs what we do in property, came in and said, okay, inventory, if it's a high theft item, you have to tag and put it on inventory all the way down to $100. So you buy a $101 item that's on a high theft list, you have to tag it, you have to inventory it every year. They've let us renegotiate that high theft list. So we looked at some information from DPS and said, what is stolen? Because we had things on there like calculators that were on there for years. Didn't need to be on there anymore. So we pared that list down to what we really consider high theft items. So between $100 and $500, those high theft items, we were able to take off about 12,000 items off of inventory. That's good for the departments. That speeds up your time. You know, you're not out looking for those little nitpicky items that we don't, you know, that aren't again, high theft, but I don't want to say not important, but not as important as the things you should be following up on and keeping it. So that's something that can help you guys out. So we talk about upcoming changes. The next thing that CMS is going to allow us to do is to raise that limit, that $500 limit for high theft items, up to $1,000. That's going to go into effect January 1. That what that means is anything that is considered high theft needs to be tagged. They didn't raise the 100, so we've got the $100 to $1,000 now instead of the $100 to $500. High theft items still need to be tagged in there. But anything not high theft within that range is going to be able to be removed from inventory. My last guess by looking at our inventory was about 20,000 items coming off of inventory. Our inventory right now is about 77,000 items. So that's a pretty good chunk of items, individual items that you're not going to have to look for anymore. Things like tables, chairs. There's a lot of, executive chairs that are around that are $550, $600. Those are going to come off of inventory. Desks, things like that. Things that don't move much, that we don't lose much, that people aren't stealing. They don't think we should spend our time looking for as much, which makes sense. Now we need to focus on the things that are going to be high theft. Computers are high theft. So if you buy a $900 desktop, it's still going to be on inventory, even though it's below $1,000. Tablets, servers, obviously, those type of things. Now, external hard drives, they're not on the high theft list. It's a big exposure to data, of course. Flash drives and things like that are too. So they've got to draw a line somewhere. That's where it's been drawn. But the computers will definitely stay on the list on there as long as they're above $100. When computers start becoming below $100, we're going to have to deal with that in another way. But for now, those things are still staying on the inventory list. So as I said on here, it applies to non-high theft items. It's less inventory, but that means that each item on your inventory is a higher percentage of your inventory. And understand that because whenever the department turns in their inventory each year, they're supposed to stay below a 1% loss. That's what the state says, that's the guideline. Well, that's university-wide. University-wide, our inventory loss is well below a 1%, but we also have some pretty high dollar value items that are found every year, like airplanes that are more than $1 million. Those aren't going to go missing. But now that we've also got items that were maybe lower dollar but higher volume, like desks that don't go missing, chairs that don't go missing, we find them every year. Those things aren't on inventory to kind of help balance things out. So that means that all of your computers, all your tablets that are out there that are floating around, all the laptops, whenever you can't find one of those, it's a higher percentage. So it hurts the department itself. And what the CMS says to us is, we can go back, we can look at your inventory, and I don't know what it's going to do to the university's inventory, but they can look at that and say, well, you guys are at 2% loss. Let's go back to your departments and look at the ones that had the highest percentage loss and re-inventory. That means that we've got to be involved. That means internal audit probably has to be involved, and we have to go through a big process. So, the things that I need you to do is, first off, surplus your old stuff. Get rid of as much of your old items that you can. Things that are going to sit around and that are going to disappear on you, get rid of them. If you're going to keep them around, secure surplus items. So if you've got 5 or 6 computers that you're going to surplus, don't set them out in the hallway to do it. Put them in a room that's locked. You know, keep them out of sight. Because it's surprising to me when I came from, like I said, the accounting office. As an IT manager, you're in charge of all things computer. So if I take a computer off a desktop, I put it in a room, I put a new computer on, they were fine. Then I start working in property control, and I start to find out that in some areas, well, Professor so-and-so has a lab, and they've got their grant, and they bought 5 or 6 computers to do their thing with them, but the IT department, the IT person for that department doesn't handle any of that. They take care of their own things. So that's been a little bit for me to deal with, and that's something I know you guys have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But inventory time comes around. If we just ask the professor, where are those 5 computers? Well, I don't know, one of them broke, and we put it over here, and I'm not sure. And well, we've got to have a better handle on it than that. We can't just accept the fact that that person is going to be in charge of those computers, because ultimately the university policy says that the unit officer is the person in charge of the inventory assigned to that unit. So if you're not able to go into that department, some people have told me, well, I can't go over there. That's his stuff. They won't let me in that room. If you're not able to do that, you need to talk to your director, your dean, whoever your person is that is the unit officer, and express to them, hey, if I'm going to be in charge of this stuff, I need to be able to do something with it. I need to be able to account for it, or we need to work out a deal with this person so that they understand how important these things are, because these computers are not coming off inventory. I don't care if they're 10 years old. We're not taking them off of inventory, so they're going to be a high dollar target, if they come up missing. So work with those folks, and I'll be happy to advocate for you. If you have got issues with that, I'll come and talk to them. I'll talk to my executive director, and she can, work the channels that they need to work, but to express to them how important this stuff is. If you've got a lockable storage for laptops, things like that, things that you get checked out all the time, in and out of the department, use it. If you don't have it, let me know. Surplus is always getting items, just black cabinets that have locks on them. Those things where you can stack 20 or 30 laptops in there and keep them locked up, and you've got a key to it. That's something the auditors love to see when they come into a department and they look around. They want to see these things. Each year, I get a list from the auditors that says, here's 25 items we need to find across campus. Normally, they just pick 25 random items. This last year, they started picking groups of items within departments, because I guess they assume that, you can find that one item, but can you find 5 if I pull them all for you? So we end up in the department a lot longer. I have to take the auditor to the department. We have to find all 5 of the items, and they're going to look around while they're there. And they're also writing down tag numbers of things they see while they are there. And then they're going back to our system and tracking them back, saying, well, show me where this is set up. Show me where this is on your inventory. Show me what department it belongs to. Show me that the location in here is where we found it. Maybe not down to the room, but is it in the right building? Is it on the right floor of that building? I know we had some stuff here in the library, and they wanted to make sure that it was on the correct floor of that room, of the building. So that's the kind of things that the auditors do come in and see. And as Scott said earlier, this is going to come back to the departments. I can only advocate for you, and I can work with you to help you, but it's going to come back to you, and I'm going to have to come back to the department and say, okay, they're telling me we need to do another inventory with your department because you guys had such a high loss rate. And of course, nobody wants that. Nobody really wants to deal with it. So it's easier to deal with it ahead of time. The lockable storage, again, keeps your things closed up and doesn't let them walk off. Use equipment loans. If you're in a department who doesn't have any item out on loan, that's great, but I'd say there's very few out there. Somebody's got a piece of equipment out there. Make sure you're using those loans. Keep them up to date. You were going to send them out. We send them out with inventories at the same time as inventories when they go out around February every year. Use a log for short-term checkouts. If you've got an item that comes and goes, you don't need to fill out a loan and get it all processed, but keep some kind of sheet there showing here's the tag number of the item, here's who took it out, when they checked it out, and when it came back. You know, keep that with those items so that we can, an auditor can see at any time, where is that item. If they come and look for a particular piece of equipment and it's not there, they're going to want to see something like this. They're going to see a form signed by the department showing that it was checked out. And they'll want to make sure that it was checked back in whenever it came back. And I do, whenever we talked about audits, the finding that I showed earlier is from the external auditors. That's the company that the university has to pay to come in and audit us every year. We also have an internal audit department, and the internal audit department is doing a periodic quarterly check on these things. So they may contact you from internally and say, I need you to show me where these 5 items are that we pulled. And I think if I'm not mistaken, they're working with you. If you can't, if somebody's got it on loan, they can take a picture of the laptop with the tag number, and you can send that to them and say, here, we do have it. They just want to make sure it exists and it's still around. So internal audit is also hitting this. So pretty good chance your department's going to get hit with one of those within the next year to 2 years. That's just the time frame that they go by. The last thing I'd like you to make sure to do is take inventory seriously. When you go out, it's a pain. Granted, I understand that. It's a pain to do. It's always the wrong time of the year for somebody. If that's a problem for you, come talk to me. We can switch inventory. It doesn't necessarily have to be done at that time of the year if that's an extremely busy time for your department. We can do it in the middle of fall if you want to do it. We have to do one annually, so we can split those up. Don't take for granted that the item that you're looking for is there because it's always been there and it's in that closet. We had that case this year with one of the items that were pulled from the external auditors. I called the department and said, we need to find this. They said, okay, it's in this wire closet, because it's always in the wire closet because it's connected to our surveillance system. Okay, we went there, we showed up, somebody had pulled it out and switched it with another device. Well, the LAN admin doesn't take care of that particular device, but because it still stayed under their inventory, they're the ones that were responsible for it. So they never went and checked, and I guess it had been switched out at some point, and we're not sure where it is. It's probably still on campus. It's probably in another wire closet in a different spot on campus, but we couldn't locate it for them. So that ends up in the audit, that kind of thing. So take it seriously. Go out and physically put your eyes on the tag numbers on the inventory.
All right. Thank you very much, Lauren. Any questions for Lauren about inventory?
Yes, sir.
Are you guys taking any steps to when you turn in surplus paperwork to increase the time it takes to pick it up?
We have.
Because we have a lot of stuff. I mean, computer labs, when we surplus a lot of items.
Right.
And we secure them, but it's taking up valuable real estate. And it takes 3 to 6 months to have a pickup.
I completely understand. I'm not going to give you an excuse, but I'm going to tell you, we pay physical plant for laborers to pick those items up. So we've gotten down to where we have to schedule those pickups at a certain time. And for us, the best way to do it is to make sure our truck is full when we leave campus. In the past, they were just having physical plant work, and the guys would pick up 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 there. And if you know where our surplus warehouse is, out on 51, we've got distance back and forth. So there was a big cost to that. So we've tried to minimize that by really hitting areas around campus in sort of a cycle. Now, granted, if they've been in the library and it's time to come back around to the library again, and the library hasn't said we've got things to pick up, they're not going to stop by. So if you haven't, I'm assuming you've already filled out the paperwork or you sent in a pickup request saying those need to be picked up. And if not, that's the first step. Go to the website, fill out the surplus pickup request, and get that. I would like to see us picking up more items. We talked about it just the other day. I talked with Ella.
My only concern is when it sits there that long, there's more room for things to disappear,
Yeah.
or get lost, or moved, or whatever.
I agree.
So the more you can shorten that time frame, I think you'll see less
Right.
things, not found.
Yeah, good point. Thanks. Yes, Bernadette.
When we mark changes, say it was changed from this room to that room.
Mhm.
We've noticed in the past that things were updated on the spreadsheet, so the next year when we get the inventory sheets again, it still has all the old stuff, and we gotta go back and refine it.
See,
Is there anybody there that
yeah.
takes those and updates those records?
Yeah, they do. Charles Vale in our office he kind of coordinates all of the inventories, and we've made some changes throughout the years to try to make them a little more standard. I would love to have a more automated way to do it. I mean, flat out, I would love to have scanners and things like that. We don't have those. We reached out to IT a couple times, and we just never quite got that going. I would love to see that where you wouldn't have to do that information, but for what we have now on the inventory sheets, and if you guys aren't familiar with them, they're sent out in an Excel spreadsheet, and there's a section in the front that says notes. And what we ask the people to do in the instructions is to mark in the notes anything that you need changed. If the description is wrong, if you feel like this item is not described correctly and it would be described better and would help you find it next year easier, we'll make a change to it, but you have to put it in those notes fields. What we find a lot of departments will do, and I'm not saying you did this, but we'll open that spreadsheet and they'll just go over here in the location field and they'll make changes to it. They'll change the building and they'll change the room, and then they'll send the form in, and we don't have any idea what was done over there. You know, we can't tell that anything was changed. We don't have a mechanism to match things up like that. So if you've got the change, it should go in the notes column. And yes, when he gets those, they go through, I don't know how many highlighters, highlighting colors of changes that need to be made, and we've got students that go in and make those changes. If you see it's not been done, let me know specifically about that, because those should be done every time they come in. Yes.
Wouldn't have been a real issue except for when you change buildings.
Yeah, you wouldn't have seen it if you didn't change buildings, right?
Anything else for Lauren? What's in your hand?
Nothing's in.
So Lauren, what I think I heard you say is that now Shannon gets to take that lateral file off my inventory.
If she can take it off. the list.
Oh, on the contrary.
She's
Yeah.
finding more things she can put on the new guy's list.
And if you don't work for the IT department, you probably may or may not know that they have their own internal inventory system that Shannon, put in last year. Was it last year? Year and a half,
We
yeah.
launched it last year, it took about a year to
So
get ready.
they're sort of like a pilot program. We'd like to get more people involved with that and get more departments into that and buy into it. So hopefully we can continue moving that direction.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Lauren. And now Jay Skolarich going to tell us a little bit about encrypting at the end user device.
Well, I hope everybody got their fill of donuts today, and we appreciate you showing up. So much so that Will said he's taking everybody to lunch when we're done here. So,
I'll take you there. I need to take you 2 or 3 at a time. The car's small.
well, Scott touched a little bit in the intro on this, and I'm just going to talk a little bit. Last land meeting we had, I talked about DDP. I said we were piloting that, and the pilot did what it's supposed to do, proved whether we should go with it or not. And we chose to not go with it for a few different reasons. One, it was cost prohibitive, that we needed licenses per machine. Two, there's management. We had front end, back end server to manage, but really the big killer for me was the man hours needed to deal with DDP when Windows updates came out. It required removal of the client and full decryption of the drive, just to do a Windows major update. And then you had to reinstall and re-encrypt for each major update. So that was a killer right there. And I think Scott said we'd been using MBAM for 6 or 7 months. Really, we've been using it for a little bit longer than that. We've got it out in some of our centralized areas on a larger number of machines for a year and a half now. When we did the pilot, we actually installed DDP and chose from the console to decrypt the MBAM portion, right? So now we're switching back on those. So we have been using it out there for a year and a half and had good success with it. The problem that we had with MBAM previously was reporting. We didn't have reporting. We've since, the systems teams have been working hard on the SCCM server, and they've got reporting working. So MBAM does report to SCCM. Encryption, if it's not encrypted, you can dig down into it and it'll tell you why it's not encrypted. And in my talk here today, this is about Windows devices. All right, we'll be looking into a Mac solution as we move along. The Macs did report to DDP that they were encrypted. We were using File Vault on Macs, and we'll ask that we go that way with Macs probably, but we don't have a reporting method. We'll get to that. But anyway, so with MBAM and SCCM is what we need to have out there on all these machines, not just for patching, whether you choose to go with our patching methods or continue your own, but for deployment of applications and deployment of MBAM. How many decentralized admins out here use SCCM? So we got a few. That's good. So again, we're not trying to push anything down your throat. It's just that we need to do this. This is an aggressive timeline. I didn't switch to this slide right away to start because I didn't want everybody's attention up there. For the centralized areas, those that aren't encrypted yet, we plan to have all the centralized areas encrypted by the end of the year. For decentralized areas, and now that we're talking about desktops and mobile devices. For the decentralized areas, we're just looking at mobile devices right now, Windows devices. As a start, if you choose to go with desktops, or you want to choose a group of your desktops to go with for testing, that's great. But we're looking at it's the spring break time period is what we're shooting for, and we have to be aggressive. This audit finding's been out there for a good couple of years now, so it's time to get that resolved and move forward. So the first part of that, to get SCCM going for the reporting, not just for MBAM, but it's great for software reporting, machine hardware reporting. I use it daily to jump in and say, do a query and say, what software do these machines have, and I'll know where I need to be pushing my updates to. So, and even some of our centralized areas, the LAN admins don't really work with SCCM. They just kind of let the systems team handle it. They push out the patches as required, and then let them handle it that way. But the first and most important thing is AD, getting the machines on AD. I understand there's going to be a lot of different scenarios out there. I was working with Bernadette yesterday, and they've got some laptops that they use in the police cars. 98% of the time, they're in the police cars, all right? So, do they need to be on AD? In order to report, they do, all right? In order for us to push software to them, they need to be on AD. So, when we do that, like I said, there's a group policy that we apply to the machines, and that gets the settings that first apply the group policy to push SCCM, right? That's the easy part. Then MBAM, there's more involved with MBAM to get MBAM on the machines, as far as TPM settings, it reporting the key, the MBAM encryption key back to AD, so it's stored in AD. We run into a few machines out there that somebody has just turned BitLocker on, right? Well, that's a local key. If the user doesn't have it or has lost it, that's a big problem right there. So having that key in AD to where you can go out to a site to pull that key back yourself to unlock the machine if you need to is real handy. So, so we push SCCM using group policy. Then we would push MBAM to the machines. And then after that, oh, and when you install SCCM, you're automatically set to receive the patches from the systems team. You can choose to opt out if you want to still control your own Microsoft patching and stuff. That's your prerogative. So like I said, so we'll work together, and I plan on getting training, definitely. Training as far as the SCCM console goes. It's going to be more easily adopted with training. You know how to use it. But then along with that, working group. We're going to put a working group together so that we can get together and come up with implementation and ideas. Or as we're going along, problems you have, and you can voice your opinions there. And with that, I invite any of you to join that working group, because the more people we have there, the more input we have, and the better we can do on implementation. So we need to establish best practices as we roll it out across campus. And like I said, I think it's going to help us all in the long run to better manage our desktops. So, yes, Bill.
How do I join the working group?
I would say at this point, send me an email, and
I'm in, Jay. He's right.
all right. Yeah, we haven't determined who's in charge of that, but I have a feeling I know who's going to be in charge of that. So.
Yeah, not the new guy. Not the new guy. Yeah, this is one of the things that I hope in general at SIU, the collaboration spirit is high. I came from an institution where that was indeed the case, and a lot of work happens and gets pushed up from these working groups to decision makers to help with input on efforts that go forward. And so I hope that you choose to participate and find working groups like this to be of value to you. And that's an excellent segue, my friend, into, any other questions for Jay regarding the, thank you, data encryption and stuff.
I got one for Jay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jay, how are you gonna handle pushing out Identity Finder, SCCM, encryption onto an 8-year-old Flex 760? That barely runs
All right.
Linux.
Now that's right, and that's one thing. As far as an 8-year-old machine, is there TPM? Does it have TPM? Yeah, is it in the BIOS? It might not be. All right, and that's one of those that, and it'll show up in the report that it didn't encrypt because there's no TPM back. So, and that's another case-by-case basis. How do we handle those machines, right? And that will become, if we ever get new machines in here, that'll become less and less of an issue. But SCCM, the machines really take no performance hit when SCCM is loaded up. So I think the hang-up would be in encryption if it doesn't have the hardware it needs.
That's exactly the fodder for the working group, to identify those issues and work through.
I have one other small question. I don't have a lot of this, but other people might. The first target, are the laptops and tablets, right? For both SCCM and encryption if they don't already have them. Laptops and tablets are typically taken many times home, off campus, and sometimes don't ever come back on campus. Does SCCM live on the edge of the firewall, or do you have to be actually on campus to get updates pushed to you, or to
If,
push things.
if it's joined to AD,
Yeah,
all right,
yeah,
and it was off campus, somebody would have to VPN in
okay.
in order for it to receive SCCM or receive any updates through SCCM.
Okay.
So that's,
And VPN has been restricted now to only people who actually have a business need for it. So somebody may be off campus, doesn't have a business need for VPN, except for to
Right.
receive updates,
Right.
which everybody needs.
Derek, do you have anything to do with that?
If it's on campus at any point and it gets SCCM on it, still working through a little bit of connection issues. Right now, it can see it when it goes off campus, so it can still do the reporting stuff. We have one server that's set up that has the public IP and the firewall open to it, so it can actually report its stuff in. Still working through getting Windows updates to push through there. And,
But that's the goal, right?
yeah, the goal is to have them also able to do all of their stuff off campus as well.
Will the key server eventually work like that too? Because in the past, machines that don't hit the VPN or hit campus networks will expire their key.
Get a Mac.
Bill, what reason is there for a work machine to be off for more than to be off for like 2 years? What business needs do you, I mean, I know there's extended campus and some other areas like that do have those needs, but what?
I don't have any, but my wife, for example, has had a iPad that hasn't hit campus network and I know iPads aren't these, but I don't think she's taken it back to campus for 5 years, and she's a faculty person. And I'm not really asking questions for myself, but,
Right.
I do know that this happens in the colleges, not necessarily in the
Yeah,
students.
I would say there's probably some professors out there that get a laptop, they take it home, and that's where it lives.
So,
I mean,
China
this is more
or
of
desktop.
a policy change we need to have on campus to make sure machines come back eventually, because then that runs into the same issues that Lauren was kind of mentioning earlier in terms of, if a machine's gone in there, I mean, I have 2 kids, and if I leave a machine at home all day long in a closet somewhere that sits there for 6 months, it's not doing SIU any good, it might not be doing me any good, but it's also, I don't know.
So the good part is that we're not the only kind of organization with a mobile workforce, right? And Microsoft has a solution for managing computers external to the enterprise, the corporate network, however you want to talk about it. And for whatever reason, that part of my old brain cells aren't firing at the moment. It has a name that's very cute and has an acronym. And we'll,
Intune? Is that what you're talking about?
no, not Intune, but it is actually an extension of your Active Directory to your, I don't know. No, it's definitely not that. It's really cute, like iDef or something, MostDef, not that. But we can find out what that is. I mean, it's a solvable problem, having a remote workforce and still being able to manage the resources that are in them. And I will start Googling hard as soon as I get back to that.
But good points, and like I said, stuff that we need to bring up in the working group, and my thought is it should be not just land owners, but have systems team in there too. Maybe we'll have network involved at some point, just to try to work through how do we handle all these different scenarios.
What about classrooms and labs?
We've talked about that briefly, and our first thought was, we don't need to do classrooms, but student sits down in there and goes to whatever website and puts in their credit card number and does whatever. They could still contain sensitive information. So something to talk about. Randy, what was your plan? Wherever you are.
My plan is your plan.
Yeah. Well, I think
Give that man a dollar.
I think you said on your classrooms, you're just going to go ahead and encrypt to cover it.
Right.
So, but again,
If you're wiping profiles and you're getting re-imaged every week or so, is that really I just hate to load up more computers,
Right,
more
right.
software than.
And that's a good point. I mean, if you're reloading that often, that's a good case for, well, we don't need to do it. And I think, I would say, loss of a computer from a classroom is less likely. Not that it's never happened, because I know it happened at Fainer several years ago. So somebody busted in the window and stole machines out of the classroom. So anyway, but good point.
All right, any other questions for Jay? Any more ideas around desktop encryption? All right, so groovy little graphic here, sum things up, pull things together. Hopefully you've all sort of put those pieces together, right? Use Active Directory, push a little SCCM, run some identity finder, and remediate or encrypt devices. Remediate as in remove sensitive information. Encrypt drives or encrypt devices, patch devices. The nice thing about SCCM that maybe we talked about briefly, but I'll hit on, is that the inventory control, there may be some application of locating hardware through that, and certainly software inventory control. Creates for a secure environment. Oh, yay. Linda made that. She's cool. Okay, shall we beat this horse one more time? You know, the morphing challenges, the things that are happening in security and why we're all working together. You know, again, it doesn't matter if you're a decision maker, if you're an implementer, if you're an end user or a victim. Woe to the victim. You know, security matters, and it's just a matter of one experience before you figure out just exactly how much it matters. Oh, gold star, getting close to the end. So, last part, most fun part, the part that's more important to me than a lot of what's going on, and we have 1 whole minute to do it, is to talk about how we're going to communicate and cooperate and discuss going forward. LAN admin meetings. I really miss them, and I want to see them happen again.
I want to see them happen virtually.
Yeah, okay. So there's at least, you know, a few of you that'll join me in a meeting. They need to occur quarterly. They need to occur monthly. We should do this once a week. What's a reasonable, well, do the LAN admin meetings sincerely bring value to you as you do your work and kind of hear what your colleagues are doing and do some brain share? So sincerely, I would think something like that brings value not only to me, but hopefully to you as well. Is that something that we should do quarterly or monthly? Any feelings one way or the other? Quarterly? All right, that's frequent enough? All right, excellent. Then what we will do is we will sort out the logistics and information and whatnot for LAN admin meeting to happen in about 3 months' time, which probably puts us at the beginning of the semester or so after Census Day, January-ish. Because y'all want to do that right before Christmas and potluck and all that? No?
New semester starting, probably say the end of January, beginning of February.
End of January, beginning of February. Okay, all right. Any other kind of initiatives that we need to do that sooner rather than later? All right, in January, end of January, beginning of February. It is. Any questions, comments, concerns, things that you want to see, hear, or do about our LAN admin role? Topics you want to see come? Yes, sir.
Not so much for this group, but end user training more. It's hard to get across to the end users that this is important.
Right.
And I know Scott was talking about hopefully mandatory security training.
Right.
But just, you know, what is this? You know, they're all confused, or I get a lot of people
Absolutely.
confused.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I think is a good tool is securing the human through SANS Institute. I mean, it's a smart bit of training. Nobody loves to go through training, having just gone through my ethics training and my sexual assault awareness training as a new employee. Nobody loves it, but, you know, it helps us be aware, and I think that is certainly a direction that we expect the state mandated user awareness training to take. Yeah.
Shameless plug for the Security Day presentations for the end users.
Yes, thank you. Right, buttons. Who's got the button? Let's see, any other questions? No, you just want to go to lunch? All right, well, I'll file into my car. Coming up, these are trainings that are more geared towards end users. If you do have folks that you know are interested in that sort of thing, a handful of topics carrying on through the rest of the month on Tuesdays at 10:30 a.m. Is that right? Yeah, I'm feeling fairly good about that.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, all right, good deal. 10:30 a.m. in 752 of the Morris Library. Fun and exciting. Last week, Richard regaled us on all kinds of things that were computer attacky kind of things. I even got one of the trivia questions right. Yay me. Also, ISAT is hosting an event on the 21st that's geared more towards younger audiences, so high school and, middle school, high school, and college students, help them with their online persona. If you haven't seen it, we have a redesigned website, a new look and feel at OIT. Give it a visit. And a shameless plug for the services that we provide in Saluki Tech. If you do have end users that have personal devices that have some issues, whether that is a vulnerability or some sort of corruption that's happened for them, or just randomly need things fixed, the walk-in center here in Morris Library is uber cool. And of course, you know, if they need a brand new device, I happen to know a lady who will sell them a new computer. Isn't that right, guy? That's so right? So right. All right. Anything else for today? No? All right.